There are a lot of things changing in the workplace. There are a lot of things changing in our careers. But this weekend, I was reminded that the fundamentals, the basics still matter. And let me tell you about the interaction that reminded me of that. I was at a board meeting on Saturday, concluding my tenure on a board of trustees. And afterwards, after the meeting was over, a gentleman who's a new board member who I'd never met walked up to me, stuck his hand out for a handshake. I shook his hand back, and he paused for a moment and he said, "You have a very firm handshake." I said, "Yes, sir. My father was a Marine. I know how to shake someone's hand." And he paused for a moment in affirmation and then gave me a smile and then proceeded to invite me to a cup of coffee or a meeting because he wanted to talk about the businesses that we're building and wanted to learn more about my career in politics. Now, that interaction, albeit brief, spoke volumes in that moment. And as I sat down back at my seat, I had a grin on my face because that moment affirmed for me something I'd forgotten about, something you may have forgotten about, which are the fundamentals of how you show up still matter. Let's take that example and let's walk through it. A handshake. One of the worst ways you can give a first impression is to have a limp or a flimsy handshake. Now, you may say, "Well, I don't want to break the person's hand." That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, when I shook his hand, and I get this 90% of the time when I shake someone's hand, mostly from older gentlemen, but I get it 90% of the time with anyone I interact with. When I shake someone's hand, they always say to me, "You have a very firm handshake," because it shows strength, confidence, poise, maturity, professionalism. And it's their very first interaction, and those are the impressions they walk away with. So, something as simple as a handshake, think about that when you're greeting another individual. And don't worry, I'll get to the online environment in just a moment. But I want to take a simple interaction and use it for the lessons that it reminded me of, and maybe needs to remind you of. That first impression still makes a difference. Maybe it's not a handshake, maybe it's a fist bump these days. Regardless, people are looking at you and how you show up in that moment. But let's also take that moment and that story to recognize eye contact still matters. And yes, there were others standing around waiting to thank me for my service on the board, but I was talking to this gentleman. And the reason why eye contact still matters is because of another principle, which is you're giving people your undivided attention. Now, there's a famous politician, and I'll never forget it, who walked up to me a few years ago, stuck his hand out to greet me, and his eyes went directly over my shoulder. He was already scanning the room for who he was going to talk to next. And of course, I'm sitting there thinking, dude, if you're that obvious about it, why even walk over and say hello? Like, just go talk to whomever you're looking for, because that is a huge sign of disrespect when you're meeting someone for the first time, that you're not looking them in the eye, but instead you're right over their left or right shoulder scanning for who's around and who's next. If there is someone you need to speak to in that moment, excuse yourself. Just say to the person you're talking to, "I'd love to continue this conversation. Excuse me for a moment. I need to step away. I will be right back, and I'd love to continue this conversation." Don't scan someone's left or right shoulder. Look at them in the eye, and if you need to step away, then do so. And so I kindly told the people who were standing around us on Saturday, "I'll be with you in just a moment. I just want to finish my conversation here in this moment." And the gentleman appreciated that he had eye contact, but also my undivided attention. So think of people you may have met recently as we're all back together in person. Think of people you may have met recently who didn't give you their undivided attention, who maybe didn't give you the fist bump or the handshake, who didn't make eye contact. Think of how it made you feel in that moment. Was that a great first impression? Probably not. But as you think of, okay, Cicely, how does this relate to the online environment? The same principles still apply. When you're on a video call, Zoom call, WebEx, turn your phone off. Turn your phone off. It is a sign of respect for the person you're talking to that you're giving them your undivided attention. And look, I have to do it all the time because my mother has an impeccable tendency to call at the wrong time. She is like a beacon for knowing when I'm on the phone and she calls. So I have to turn my phone off and say, if you need something, you got to call my brother because inevitably my phone will go off when I'm in the middle of a conversation. So know that online, turn your phone off so that you can give someone your undivided attention. But yes, turn your camera on so that you're making eye contact, so that you're looking at someone. If you need to blur your background, blur your background. But give someone eye contact and your undivided attention, even if you are on a video call, Zoom call, or whatever. The fundamentals, those impressions, still make a huge difference. And that's really what I want to remind you all of today. It is the basics that still count regardless of this changing world around us, regardless of all the workplace dynamics that we find ourselves in. We're so focused on the big things, we forget to come back to the small things that make the huge difference and leave the important impression. So, let's make sure let's make sure that we're leaving that great first impression so that you have those interactions in the future. But if you leave a bad first impression, you're absolutely going to know it and you're going to feel it as well, which is probably even the worst part than your audience realizing that you're not showing up the best that you can. So, this morning, this week, I challenge you all, absolutely keep in mind the fundamentals and why they still matter and why that human interaction over video call or in person still makes a difference. So I'm going to hop into the chat and see if we got some folks over there this morning and see who's here with us. I see we got a few folks coming on this morning. I don't see any comments or questions. So, hey, look, think about what we've said this morning. As always, you guys are so great to send me messages on LinkedIn and Facebook and YouTube. Keep your comments coming. I'll be in the chat for a few more minutes to answer your questions about this topic, and I will see you very soon.